Yeah.
Nobody knows what time.
Yeah, right. So it's just after 7, so we'll get the Facilities Committee meeting underway. Do a quick intro of staff. I'm J.P. Prego, I'm the chair of this committee. Have members Melanie Cunningham, Keith McCarrick, our business administrator Dan Rizzo, Superintendent Alan Roach, and our Director of Facilities and Operations, Doug Kenwood. I see Dana Hipser and Peg Pennypacker, fellow board members in the audience. And raising your hand in the back is Emily McCormick. So welcome everybody. This is probably the fullest this committee's been in forever. I'm going to start the meeting looking for approval of the March 27th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to call a quick audible here on the agenda. Mike is here from KCBA to give us an overview of the feasibility study. So I'd like for him to go ahead and give his presentation first before we go back and circle back to the school safety topics.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. We blink and it's been 5 months since we talked before, pre-holidays. So tonight was just a real quick refresher of all of the information that we've provided. A couple of the recommendations, both short-term and long-term. We wanted to show a life cycle cost Excel file that we're going to start and have been working with Doug to provide as well, to provide those short-term budgetary assistance, and then look at what a large project would look like timeline-wise, how long it takes from the word go to things are actually occupied, which can surprisingly take a lot of time sometimes. So for tonight, a brief review of everything, and we can get into more information if you want. I mean, the rest of the study is kind of behind all of that. If we really want to get in depth, or if you guys have questions that you've mulled over the last couple of months. Otherwise, we can kind of jump right in. As we always talk about in these studies, we're looking at both the operational and educational components of the buildings. As architects, we're looking at roofs and windows and mechanical systems to make sure that works. But as educational designers, we need to make sure these buildings operate functionally as schools. So we're analyzing your program, we're analyzing what we heard from your principals and educators to make sure that we're providing an environment respectful to that education and appropriate for students. A lot of studies in this study, one of which was an enrollment study. So just looking at students and how many, what your trends are. So pre-COVID, if we all remember those days, things were actually trending up. So like every district, 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23, things got a little shaky, things went up and down a little bit. So there was actually a little bit less students, about 66 students total, less in 2023 than 2013, which is, again, when you divide that by 13 different grades, that's 3 kids. So it's hardly anything. Looking at the projections, if the projections are saying, well, that gain that you had pre-COVID is coming back up again. So that there's an idea of about a 2% increase over the next 5 years, 5% over the next 10 years. So basically you're kind of going back to pre-COVID numbers, if that's 3,300, and back here at pre-COVID, way before here you're at 3,250. So 10 years ago. So it's basically saying you're increasing a little bit, nothing that means we need to go out and build 20 more schools, but you're certainly not shrinking anytime soon as well. So any of the capacity issues that you may be having now in some of the buildings would maintain or slightly increase over time. So again, big report inside the bigger report of lots of things to read. Enrollment is one of those things. So the numbers are returning to pre-COVID amounts, and there is some growth expected from home sales and new construction in the area. Kitchen report. This is very exciting. Every one of the buildings was taken a look at and analyzed. There was a report that was given to Doug and kind of reviewed with your food service people. Kind of standard stuff. Old equipment needs to be replaced, new equipment's running fine. But there are lists of everything in every building, things like equipment that's not being used or a leaky dishwasher. All of those things are documented and provided back to the district, and then that put into that annual maintenance schedule as well, so you know when to possibly replace a washer and dryer or something like that. A swimming report, almost as exciting as the kitchen report. Overall, the pool is in fair condition. There's some areas of cracking around the outside of the shell that you can see kind of underneath the building, or underneath the pool. Systems are aging. Again, it's kind of an older system, older filtration system as well. And so there's an idea of renovating that system. Pools are expensive. The guts of all of those things are expensive. So the pool consultant said to kind of make this brand new again, new gutters, new liners, new filtration system, it could be upwards of $1.5 million. So it's no small amount to kind of take out all the guts of a pool and start over again. But the shell of an auditorium is in good shape. We talked briefly about if we were thinking about expanding seating, we would actually go out to this wall and put seating on that side, but that's obviously a much larger project if there was an idea of expanding seating capacity. So that's the pool. Worst of all, a wastewater treatment plant report. So if you're really struggling to sleep, at Marlborough and Hereford, there are wastewater treatment plants outside. Whole civil engineering group went through all that. Reports basically came back saying permits are due. When permits are due, evaluations are due. So part of this report acts as that. And just kind of providing some annual maintenance. Again, no pun intended, but that's pretty dirty stuff out there. So it takes a lot of maintenance. The gentleman that's running those facilities right now is phenomenal. The challenge becomes who else is next? There's not a lot of people out there that know how to run them. So they're in good condition, but they're going to need continual maintenance, and certainly any opportunity at either one of the schools to get into a public system would be advisable. So those are all the other reports that were included, and then we kind of went through and did our architectural and educational analysis of all the buildings, including this building as well. So some of the impressions that we had is, as I stated several times, you're starting from a really great foundation. Obviously the middle school is brand new, that's in very good condition, and all of the other buildings, maintenance-wise, are in very good condition. The roofs are in good condition. You just went through a whole bunch of ESCO projects to try to revitalize some of the HVAC systems. So continual maintenance of these buildings is in really good shape. So as we work with dozens and dozens of districts across the state, you guys definitely get an A for maintenance. But then you're looking at some buildings that are just a little dated, some systems that are past their useful life, and it's just time to replace things. So as I said, the middle school's in great shape. The high school and the campus we found had the most needs for potential improvements over any of the facilities that you have. We did a whole report card of every building that you have, from kind of scoring things from a 0 to a 5, and saying if it's a 5, it's an immediate need. A 0, it's kind of like your golf game. The lower the score, the better. So anything that was over, say, 55 is in poor condition, fair conditions, 40 to 55, and underneath that. So when we took a look at all of the buildings, obviously, again, the middle school would be as close to perfect as possible because it's brand new. But many of the buildings were in the 40s, and the high school kind of got up into about 50, 52. The reason for some of that, if we look at the categories of issues, site, exterior, interior, and MEP, meaning mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that's pretty typical. Mechanical systems at all of your buildings, including Marlborough, which is the other new building, but that other new building is about 30 years old now. And that's about how long a well-maintained electrical system, mechanical system, windows, doors, and things like that lasts. So it's just time to start replacing those things. We all own homes. We all have to switch out dishwashers and hot water heaters and things like that over time. It's Marlborough's time now. So we found that with all of the buildings outside of the middle school. Certainly that would be even higher grade if you hadn't been doing some of the mechanical upgrades at the high school. The high school piece had some interior challenges there where we talk about ADA compliance, we talk about educational goals and things like that in the high school. So we were asked to come back with kind of a 10-year capital plan. So we found, this will be a little tough to read, but each building, and we did kind of 0 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and just came up with ideas and things like that over a long period of time and for each building. So some of the things you may notice At Hereford, we're talking in the short term about swipe cards and doors and switch gears, and then long term, it's kind of hot water heaters and HVAC systems and things like that. So this is all in the report as well for all the elementary schools, the 4-5 center, the middle school, high school, and this building as well. There is a life cycle chart, which is also going to provide information for facilities and Dan over time to say what's new in the building and what's old. So this was something new that we developed where if it's green, it's kind of in the good, meaning a roof that was recently replaced. We can plug that in and say, all right, that's going to last 25 years. As the year changes, all of that starts to slide. So this will be a live dynamic document that you guys can use over time to kind of understand what's coming up. Hey, in 3 years, we're going to have to redo the roof at Hereford. Okay, well, we better start saving for that. Or we know the mechanical system is 2 years past that time that the guys told us we should replace it. We better start budgeting for that. So that's a tool that's provided in the study as well. So the summary of the 10-year plan was talking about establishing an annual budget for those types of needs, all of that routine maintenance, roofs, paving. A district of your size with this many buildings, you're probably doing a roof job every other year or so, and probably doing some paving every couple of years. The suggested priority short term at Marlboro was exterior doors. Some of those were just over time starting to get beat up, and we want to make sure that they're always locking and very robust and can certainly maintain a good perimeter of the school building. Hereford, I talked about swipe cars at exterior doors, and the electrical gear there is 47 years old. I know that because I was born in 75. So again, it's getting old. Trust me. So the 4-5 center, we talked about some things about securing the courtyard and maybe creating a learning commons inside the building. And those are all part of the design things that we had shared with you in the past, which we can go over if you want, but I'm trying to keep this brief. And then the priorities for the high school and the high school campus. Replacing the building-wide announcement system, that's a big security upgrade, making sure that anybody, any place can make an announcement in the building. Again, creating some academic learning commons throughout, trying to revitalize a 70s plan where everybody just kind of sat in the classroom. Well, now kids are spread out a lot more. You see a lot of kids as we were walking through, sitting in the hallways with laptops and things like that. Well, if we were creating collaborative spaces, a little bit more conducive for that type of learning, that would certainly help. Upgrading the finishes, that goes along with flooring and lighting and just trying to make it look a little newer. And also beginning to plan for a possible new addition at the front. We had talked about a new front entrance, new secure vestibules, maybe some new science labs and things like that that could kind of aesthetically make a new front of the building, but also functionally create some of those academic spaces that were desired as well. The high school campus, we talked a lot about field houses, not only directly next to the sports stadium and that turf field that's right next to it, but across the road as well, over by the softball field as well. You have a tremendous campus there with 13 fields. People need to go to the bathroom. So having some of those spaces kind of spread out, bathrooms, storage, that was something that can be part of a larger campus master plan there as well. And then here, the education center, we talked a little bit about expanding some storage and looking at some ways to maybe fix some of the HVAC humidity control conditions in this building. So like I said, at the high school, we talked about a possible addition across the front, maybe taking some areas like a student commons space, blowing up the old guidance area and making that science. How can other science labs be created? So some of those science rooms are okay, but they're a little small. So let's take the rooms that want to be larger, like physics and earth science and maybe a few other types of science curriculum, and make those the newer space, make that part of where the old guidance room is, and then revitalize some of the older labs, classrooms across the front, new admin at the front door. So again, you're not walking in and the admin is half a level up the stairs and disconnected from where the front door would be. And this may also allow us to kind of expand part of those music rooms as well, which are a little tight. You have a tremendous music program and they're in a little bit of a smaller space. Then we talked about kind of blowing up a few areas, knocking down some walls where there may be a classroom or two to create some of those kind of learning commons areas. So just a simple kind of plan like this, what would that kind of take? Oh, I wanted to share, this is Interboro High School, which just broke ground last week. They have an area where this used to be their library, there were walls here. We cut a big hole in the middle of the floor so that this two-story building kind of had a heart in the middle of it. These windows are actually there now that look into their library. But when we're all said and done, this is the cafeteria that will now be a library. The cafeteria is being built in the back, and now all of a sudden you kind of took this old, tired, two-story school that really felt like two completely different worlds and just blew something right up through the middle, maintained or better accommodated all of this great existing natural light that comes into the space. So that type of a student commons setting, that type of a heart to the school is what we were talking about at what could be at the front door of the new addition that could be on the high school. So again, at the lower level, more labs and things like that. Student commons areas next to cafeteria. Cafeteria is a little bit small, so does that expand into a bit of a multi-purpose space as well. So what would something like that take? How long? We're just looking at years. It doesn't have to be 2023, but if you just think about time, you obviously always want to open up schools in the summer. Doesn't really make sense to open up a wing of a school or a bunch of extra classrooms in December because school started in September. So looking at that as well as our seasons, breaking ground in the middle of winter is tough, so you tend to want to break ground in the spring of a year. If a larger project was planned at the high school or really anywhere, you would start talking about that as a preliminary design, say, over the summer. So it's a summertime, we're going to look, dig in much deeper to those little PowerPoint diagrams that we were showing there, meet with administrators, meet with teachers and principals over the summer, come back in the fall, present to this committee, present to the board, they think about it over the fall, and then potentially consider moving ahead with any type of a project wintertime, December into January. Then that gives you a year to actually document and get all the approvals needed for any type of a building project, especially anything with an addition. That's going to put you into land development, meaning you're going to need local approvals, state approvals, environmental protection approvals, all kinds of other fun stuff. And that can take a very long time. So there's not only the conceptual planning of things that takes time, but even from the word go, yes, this is what we want, now go do it. It takes at least a year to get that type of documentation together. Then it takes 2 or 3 months to bid and award. So there's a lot of time involved to do all those things. So if we're bidding a project, say winter in 2025, construction would start in the spring of 25 through the summer. So if you're looking at maybe that addition across the front of the school, it would take at least a year and a half. And then there would be the time where we take a couple of areas of the school. Classrooms use the new addition as swing space, renovate other portions of the high school. And again, it depends on how big that renovation is. If it's spot elevations and we're just kind of doing finishes, hey, that's fine. Maybe that happens over the course of a year or over 2 summers. Obviously, if it's a much larger renovation, kind of left to right, Interboro's 3.5 years, 4 summers, 3 years. That's going to be 2 big additions and a complete gut of everything. I don't know that you need the amount of work at your high school that they do, but you can see how long something like that can take. So the lesson there is, about 6 months or so of discussion and preliminary design and approval from the board to get started. Get started still takes a year, and then even after that year, you've got, in this case, 3 summers and possibly 2 years before everything is completed. So even from the word go, you're not in it until the summer of, say, 2027. So it does take some time. So that's as quick as I could go through of all the stuff that we've had in the past. So a lot of that stuff you saw. We can get into any kind of specifics and things, but I wanted to share all the reports that were done, all the information that's already there, some additional help and things for Dan moving forward with short-term ideas, and talk a little bit about what a long-term project would look like. Any questions?
Do we actually have this report yet?
Yes, so a lot of it's in pieces, like the pool report came in and it's up online. online. So the sewer report came in and it's up online. So you have all of those pieces.
Okay.
The Excel spreadsheet thing, the working, plug in the year and it tells you what to do. That's continually going back and forth with Doug, who's been great at feeding us some additional information of that. There's a lot of specifics to that, along with our engineers. So we're trying to put that together before the end of the year. But all of those individual reports and all of the presentations and things like that in the past are all up online as we kind of presented in the past.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I'd like to take a look at all the documentation again between now and another meeting and, analyze, collect our thoughts and analyze the data and start going from there. I mean, there are many things to consider around here. A lot of the work that you outlaid in the presentation is absolutely dead on. We need to replace a number of things that have been neglected for years, and we've been doing that over the past few years, luckily, so we do have a head start on some of the issues. Adding field houses and things like that, that's something that'd be desirable, but, we have to look long-term what the implication is on our budgets for everything. I don't think we're ready to decide upon a project at this meeting or the next meeting. This would have to be going on for a few months to really flesh out what we want to do. Years ago, this building was originally proposed to be a kindergarten, never became that. We just had in the beginning of this presentation that great foundation was on the first bullet point there. All of our buildings are a great foundation. It's just a matter of bringing them back up to spec and maintaining them and putting that on a schedule. What could we do with this building? Do we keep it as an admin building, or do we possibly get rid of it, move our, have offices for our admin put into one of the other buildings? Who knows? I think these are all things that we need to consider over the next few months, looking
On
forward
options.
to the future.
I mean, this was money well spent for sure, having this whole
Yes.
court of, an outside set of eyes coming in and looking at it, not knowing our area, not knowing our buildings, not knowing anything, and looking at it from, a fresh perspective. So this was, in my opinion, like I said, money well spent. And again, I agree with you, Keith. There's a lot there that we need to still digest and go through.
Yeah, we just
Decide
can't do a
what-
knee-jerk reaction and say, hey, field houses are a great idea, because,
Right.
I see some of the people in the audience saying, yeah, that'd be really nice, and I agree with it also. But, I mean, we do have to be fiscally responsible, and we've got other larger issues first, as he had mentioned, the heating systems in Marlboro and Hereford. Marlboro, we are taking care of things already, if you haven't been paying attention. They'll be done in the next few months, replacing the boilers and a few other things. We've already done a lot of the doors and security issues for the existing building, so really now it's just a
We've been
matter
working
of
hard.
looking at that large graph that he had and analyzing what they put as priorities and seeing whether we agree with it.
If they don't-
Whether we want to bump something up onto that ahead of something else.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, as you said, priorities is the key. Understanding what's the biggest priority and then figuring out the budget of that. If the highest priority is something really expensive, well, then all these other things kind of fall to the bottom, or the other way around. How do we start with some of these smaller things and prioritize something 5 years from now when the money works out? So it goes hand in hand between, priorities and certainly Dan's efforts.
Well, luckily, we have been doing something of that, both with the Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee,
Mhm.
looking at what our expenditures are going to be over the next few years and setting aside funds for certain projects. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
A lot of
Okay,
opportunity.
so all that information is available.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thanks, Mike. All right, I guess we can circle back now to the special topic, school safety and security. I don't know, Doug or Alan, you guys had any kind of presentation to give or update on?
We don't have a
anything?
presentation. I think we relied on the presentation that was shared at the committee meeting, and we had this conversation many months ago in terms of looking at this from a financial standpoint through the finance committee, through the budget. The RFP is out and is due back today, and they're ready to be they're ready to be scored, but they're not in terms of the financial aspect of the request for increasing security, as well as the potential of adding an armed officer or security officer at each of the 5 buildings. The information that was presented last board meeting, which was by design to continue that conversation, coming off of a week or so of some student threats in the buildings that were of concern, and as well as on the heels of Nashville, and then probably a couple schools since then, there were a lot of concerns. We wanted to share with people what we were doing. I was getting questions, do we have cameras, do we have 3M film, which was the purpose of the presentation. So the topic was, the end of the presentation last week was an administrative kind of recommendation to move forward with a financial commitment as well as planning purposes for next year with that the 5, 1 per building, 5 armed officers for next year, in addition to the unarmed guards that we have at the high school that assist with traffic and that are assisting on a daily basis. And we brought the topic here based upon the questions and conversations to see what other information the committee may need. I'm sure to hear from some people that have opinions on the topic, as well as I shared with the board heading into tonight's conversation. I think, I know the question had been, do we have to have it board approved? I think at this point, if we're looking to move forward in that direction, even though barring the numbers and the financial aspects, we should, if the committee wants to move forward with a recommendation to move forward in whatever option you have, whether it's with the exception of no changes to currently what we're doing, then we should probably put a motion on a future board meeting to vote on the direction of having armed or unarmed or whatever the conversation is in that aspect, so that it's transparent, that it's there, and then we have the ability to work with the vendor that we're working with. And we know there's a lead time, which is why we kind of first started the conversation through finance and budget.
Right.
So, other than that, I think administratively we stand firm with the recommendation that was shared. And we do feel at this time, based upon all the research and the information that we've gone through, the trainings that I know Dr. Farina and Mr. Kedler have gone through, that making we feel solid the recommendation for next year to have 1 armed officer at each of our 5 schools. So we presented information to the board in the weekend in terms of other research or other information to get to that recommendation, as well as there's other options there. That's the recommendation. I think we stand by the recommendation, and then depending upon how the board conversation at the table here goes, if 2 of the 3 of you want to move something forward to the meeting, that will move forward to the May meeting. If we walk out of tonight's meeting not having enough information for a recommendation to be made, or if you want additional information or additional feedback, or however you want to move forward, we can do that in the meantime and bring this topic back in the May meeting for a recommendation, if there's going to be a recommendation for something approved in June.
Okay.
So thanks for that,
What did you say?
that nice summary.
Gotcha.
The key points being, this, for those who aren't familiar, this facilities committee is going to be the one making the recommendation to the full board of what we believe is the best path forward. The administration's recommendation of the 5 armed guards at 1 in each building, or some variation of that, or status quo is what we're doing now. I think at this point, I'd like to open it up to members of the public that are here, give you the opportunity to speak your mind, share your opinion on the matter. I know it's a very sensitive topic, so there's going to be opinions on both sides of this. So I just ask you to be respectful of each other, be respectful of each other's time. You had 6, now you have 5 members of the board, 5 out of the 9 here to listen to you and hear what you have to say, and we're very, very interested in that. So. There's no formal process to this, like there is in the board meetings. We don't have a sheet of paper with, someone's name saying who's next. So,
I think we would appreciate the fact that they say they are part of the district, that they live in the district.
yeah, I think they'll definitely welcome name.
Keeping time.
I think in interest of time, yeah, we'll keep time. If you got that handled, Alan. We'll start on this side of the room. If anybody would like to speak.
Mike?
Go
We're
right
just
ahead.
concerned moms, that's why we came tonight. I think we are definitely in the position of we should be doing absolutely anything and everything we can to keep our kids safe. They're sitting ducks, and I hate to use that term, but just one of these tragedies happening is enough. And every time this happens, it's just, we're being traumatized over and over and over again. So let's do whatever we can. And I don't think that having an unarmed security guard is enough. I think having somebody armed and trained.
To be in that situation or recognize, and keep the kids safe, or at least be there to alert sooner, if anything's happening.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So my concern is what kind of diversity or unconscious bias training will these guards be getting? Because I agree, we need to do anything we can to protect our children, but unfortunately, if you see a 6-foot-tall kid in a hoodie running towards you, you might have a knee-jerk reaction. So that's what I want to know is how are we ensuring that that won't happen?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Maggie Buckwalter, and I don't just have an opinion, I have masses of research that I did trying to search authoritative sites like NEA, the National Institutes of Health, Everytown for Gun Safety, which has a meta-analysis. I searched in a non-biased fashion to find information that would support having armed guards increases safety in schools, and it just doesn't. In fact, everything I found said that it's either a net zero or it has a negative impact on safety in schools. So whatever information that you're finding to support this idea of having armed guards in schools, I'd love to read the research. I think there's a lot of people who would love to read research because I have a plethora of stuff that I've read in the contrary. In addition to that, I'm not just coming at this as some kind of crunchy granola mom. 13 years ago, I had an incredible threat from a student who raped a school student and had guns in the home and threatened my family. And I had to bring a picture of the student to different buildings on campus to say, please don't let this student in the building. This is before we had any kind of security. So I understand in a very visceral way what the danger could be. I mean, this person is now in jail for underage rape. But it must be proven in a scientific way that it will increase safety, and it just has not been proven in a national sense in this country.
This is also a super unique and new, relatively new issue. This is a very American issue.
It is a very American issue,
Yeah.
but we have data going back at least 30 years that, I mean, we've had a school shooting in this campus. I don't know if you know that or not. I don't know if you've been here long enough to know that we had a school shooting in Upper Perkiomen. But the data is strong that it does not increase school safety. I would love to put a Band-Aid on this situation, but the data suggests that there are other things that we can do to support mental health awareness, to increase social workers and school psychologists on campus, to increase the amount of red alerts that we have with our staff in terms of behavioral analysis, and to have the folks that are school resource officers to actually be trained in trauma and intervention and scale down of escalation. That is what is proven to help reduce school violence, because most often these sort of incidents are from a school-related person, whether it is an employee or a student.
Not the most tragic of them, no. The most tragic of them are the ones that happen in elementary schools, where it is somebody who does not attend that school. So what's having mental health services available at elementary schools isn't doing anything for a person who wants to go by.
Well, again, then-
Walk into an elementary school, you know what I mean? Like that,
Okay.
to me, that's the most glaring of issues and the scariest.
Right, I mean, we just saw Uvalde, having an armed resource officer doesn't necessarily guarantee safety. So,
But we also
read the
saw-
research, if you would.
All right, hold on. This is,
Yeah. If you would share, I guess
didn't
what
wanna have
I'm
the back
imploring
and
you to
forth,
do
I
is
just
to
want everybody
share the
opportunity to share
research
their
that you're basing
opinion.
your decision-making process on.
okay.
Put it up for discussion.
They did mention too that the Nashville shooting, that the shooter did say that the reason they targeted that specific school was because there was no security.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm mixed feeling about the subject. I haven't made up my mind, but I don't know, 20 some odd years ago when I was student teaching, I was at a school that had armed security guards, and I just wanted to say that it affects the students having that around. It felt very prison-like sometimes, having, I mean, this was a case where all the security guards were armed, so it's not quite the same situation, but it does have an intimidating effect on the student body, and on the staff. Having armed people walking around, it creates a change in the personality of the school, and it's just something to keep in mind, that there's consequences just having someone in the building like that.
Thank you.
What about having like a police officer as a resource officer who's armed? Like, when I was growing up, we had one in our school who was a resource officer, not just for
Because of our
security.
demographics, it won't work. We don't have a police department. If we had a centralized police department, a regionalized police department, you'd be able to cover all the schools. You know, Bradley's sitting here laughing, this has been attempted in the past. The only police departments you have in this area was Pennsburg. Years ago, it was Red Hill, Pennsburg, and East Greenville. Then Red Hill dropped out, became East Greenville and Pennsburg. Then they split, which turned into a fiasco. It's still going on, what, 10 years later, Bradley, almost? Yeah. But-
6, 5.
Yeah, they might come to a solution ultimately, but the subject has been broached over the years. We're covered by East Greenville, which covers our 4-5 center, Pennsburg, which covers none of our schools, and the state police. So you don't have a common thread there.
Don't forget Marlboro.
Well, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But you're correct, but we don't have any that actually cover our schools other than East Greenville for the 4-5 center. You need to get a school resource officer, you have to partner with a police department essentially. We don't have one.
Again, the research from leading.
I'm just answering her question, that's all.
Yeah, but again, even if it's an actual police officer, the research upholds that it does not make it safe.
I've seen schools with the armed guards in, I've seen the schools with the SROs. My kids were in a school that had an SRO. No big effects against it. You know, the kids were talking to them. It used to be like when Pennsburg had the joint police department, the officers were out throwing snowballs with the kids during the winters.
Keith,
You know, that's the
your
way some of the
personal
SROs.
information does not uphold what research shows.
I'm
That's
not
anecdotal, and I
debating with you, I'm
understand
just
it.
saying.
My dad's
this
a
is-
cop.
Thank you.
I got along with cops. That's anecdotal. That is not research-based. I'm sorry. You can't bring that up as
So
anecdotal of the
is,
story.
okay, so is the observation saying that it affects student morale. There was
No, that's
nothing-
actually proven.
All right. This is what
I'll
I
send my
did,
research.
Maggie, this is what I didn't want to happen. I didn't want to have the back and forth and the arguing about it. I want everybody to be respectful of each other's opinions. So let's
But-
please stick to that.
Opinions are fine, but I'm just saying that's an opinion. Let's not
Okay.
count it as
Thank
research
you.
or fact.
Okay. Anybody else from this side?
Yeah, something I don't talk about much, but I remind my kids of, I was in the classroom next door, Jason Smith come in and shot a kid, and we all saw from the chemistry classroom, because the chemistry classroom in the high school is completely open, which I'm guessing is still to this day. They were in the biology classroom. Felt like hours until police showed up, and we didn't have a resource officer. There was no security guards back then, and we all were shuffled out of the back of the chemistry room downstairs and just had to wait for somebody to show up. So, I've worked in many industries. When I got out of college, I worked in criminal justice and other things. Response time is everything. I was a firefighter for many, many years. Response time is what's most important, I think.
I agree.
So, and whoever the resource officer, whatever we call them, whatever they become, they have to be trained, which they should be, and if something does happen, that they can help a child who's down, or a teacher, or whoever. Because things get sideways, and I've seen plenty of them. So just leave it at that. Response time's important.
Thank you.
I have one more.
Sir?
Well, first of all, it kind of concerns me that we don't have a partnership with our local law enforcement. And number one, we should have that partnership because they are the initial responders. And my other question is have they endorsed this type of plan? That being said, what we have to also realize, our biggest asset is our faculty that's already in the school. Most of these incidents stop within 7 minutes, and it's normally the interface of a faculty member stopping the situation. The other issue is what's the risk, and is who you hire. If you're hiring just 235 security guards, their training is 40 hours and done. You know, so if it's a private contracted service, it would be somebody that got 40 hours worth of training, no critical decision-making skills similar to a law enforcement. And that being said, everybody in law enforcement throughout the country, when they qualify, they don't qualify under stress. They qualify at paper targets under no stress. Placing somebody shooting back at you is a different scenario. And I think that's some of the stuff that we have to look at. And then and as this gentleman said, that security person is not responsible for taking care of people after they're shot. Their mission should be to neutralize the subject. And that means, so when you look at the Nashville, those police officers did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they stepped over victims to neutralize the subject. So what we have to really look at is be careful what we're asking for and what are the risks. Because if you look at the news every night and there's a police involved shooting, and I'm not saying that they hit a subject, but look how many rounds are fired by law enforcement. There's a fear factor, and there should be a fear factor. You know, so even if 2 rounds neutralize a subject, there might be 9 or 10 other rounds, and we don't identify where they go. And that is my only concern. So it depends on who you put in that type of position. It's a big responsibility. And for the board, it's a big responsibility to make this decision. And what are the outcomes? Because, you know, everybody's going to have an opinion whether it goes right or goes wrong.
So I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
So I just want to say that I know we have the input, even if it's a service, we have the input on the people, correct?
Do you have an endorsement from law enforcement?
I know, I mean, we don't, like we said, we don't have one.
No, we have
that
5
takes care of
police
each one of
departments,
us.
and they're going to be integrated and involved, so when they come in. So I think it's important that they either endorse it, and they have to be a part of the plan. This can't be done in a silo.
Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I just-
Well, I'd like to get to everybody else, though.
Are
I know you already had
there other
your
security
opportunity.
measures that are being put in, within the schools that maybe like we're not aware of aside just from?
Were you at our meeting on?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, is that up somewhere? Is that up on our?
It should have went out on a Friday, but let me check.
Okay. I'm trying to
We're
get to
checking.
it, because we did go over all the things
All
that
the
we've
things.
been doing and have done in the last 5, 6
Okay.
years.
Okay. Move over to this side now, so, go ahead.
Okay, Christine Schmoyer, Pennsburg. I went in with a research perspective. I just Googled effectiveness of armed guards in schools. Everything that came up had a negative impact having armed guards. One, Secret Service report. Nowhere in the 68 pages does it recommend having armed guards. It recommends taking measures to provide support to students. From Sandy Hook Promise, 68% of the gun-related incidences were guns picked up from the home of their family, their relatives, or friends. 70% of the students that, 70% of the incidents of students are committed by students 18 and under. They are in our buildings, and we have to take measures to keep them from getting to the point of committing suicide. They want to commit suicide. I think it was 50, there's so many numbers in here that show that this is not the method. There's about 50 things more that we could do before we get to this point. In my mind, this is the very last step, and we have so much work to do. I don't know what it stands for again, JMA. They talk about all the things that you can do. All these reports talk about what to look for. They talk about when students come back from a break, Christmas break, spring, summer break. numbers are higher. Okay? So what are we doing then? There's so many statistics in here of things that we can do before we bring a gun into a building. The gentleman said that, that it changes the perspective of the school. It absolutely does. This, by Brown University, states that in this report, that it creates a more, whatever to jail cycle.
School to jail pipeline?
Yeah, school to jail pipeline. It says in this report, all of these reports that I picked up randomly say there's so many other things that we can do before we get to bringing guns in the building. And I think we have a lot of work to do. Response is absolutely critical. One of the statistics showed how many, the time that it takes to notify the police department. What can we do to reduce that time? So there was a 0 to 1 minute, 1 to 5, you know. What can we do to reduce that? Can we put radios in the classroom, and then they radio the front, and then they immediately notify the police with a button underneath their desk? You can have that in 30 seconds.
Panic buttons, like they even have.
Are we doing that? There's so many things that can be done.
Some of those things that you're saying, we have addressed in our presentation. I know, I think I saw you.
Yes, I was there, absolutely.
Okay.
There's so many more things. Like I said, 68% of the kids get their guns from their family or friends.
Well, that we don't have a lot of choice on.
But, well, no, but why can't we commit, why can't we put together a program that says, hey, lock up your guns? Families of school students, lock up your guns. You have cousins, relatives, lock up your guns. That doesn't cost anything, except maybe some marketing. If we can reduce the number of guns that are available to students, we will reduce the potential for shootings. So yes, we have done a lot, but there's so much more that can be done, and the evidence proves it. And I haven't heard, I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time, but I didn't hear anything about the evidence to support that this would be a great solution. If I remember, I heard 3 lines. That was it. So.
Thank you.
Update? Okay. Okay. The April 14th update then has the slide deck that we talked about.
Go ahead.
What I have to say kind of dovetails off of that, and the reason why I'm here is because I was so concerned after that meeting by the extent of the presentation, which was a single slide saying, and in summation, we would like to recommend armed guards. I was further alarmed, and frankly, it was extremely insulting that there was a board member who brought up the JAMA evidence, the JAMA study, which reviewed 133 incidents. Presence of armed guards did not correlate with fewer injuries, but the death rate was 2.83 times greater in school shootings with armed guards. There may be causation in terms of a phenomenon known as the weapons effect. So if you want some little jargon terms, I've got a lot of them. One is the weapons effect, that they think may increase this suicidal tendencies, wanting to get shot, da-da-da. There were other things that were brought up at the meeting, such as metal detectors. I went in and I learned what the PCCD physical security tiered recommendations are. And I saw that metal detectors are a tier 3 improvement in those guidelines. Arming of the doors was also addressed, well, it was also brought up at the meeting. That represents a tier 1 level improvement. And honestly, when these items were brought up, what the message was from the administration was, this is not going to change. This recommendation is not going to change. I thought it was extraordinarily dismissive of the fact that this board would consider evidence-based, research-based pieces. So, Dr. Roche, I did hear you mention, I know I'm not supposed to mention people, but I did hear that we've done research, and I think I fall into that camp as well to know what the research is. I have a mixed bag on this topic, but I would like to see us follow the evidence, follow the research. There were armed guards at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, at Uvalde. There are other schools as well. Again, the research is out there to be found. But Also, there is an issue, I have a couple of other questions too, but there is also another issue when a school shooter is involved, when an armed guard is involved. Having school resource officers that are armed has or school resource officers in general creates a disproportionate rate of arrests for non-violent behavior. So you can go ahead and find this. This is called mission creep of guards that don't have enough to do and really kind of go looking for little things. And this does feed what they were mentioning, the school to prison pipeline. This problem disproportionately affects students of color. And it's important for the district not to just overlook something like that. And what is the environment that it creates? How do people feel in their school? I do have a couple of additional questions that I'd like to see be considered. Of course, you're already considering what will the cost of the personnel and their benefits be. Additionally, what would the costs of the training to be? Your typical SPO has a police academy training. Is that the right person to come into a school environment? What are their biases? What other trainings could they get to interact with 5-year-olds? Will the school district assume any additional liability for intentionally allowing a firearm into the previously gun-free school zone? That's a question I have. Check with your insurer. Like, does that create an additional liability? Because now you've said no guns, now you've said there's one here, as we did here at the school board meeting. Sometimes those get left on the bathroom counter, that sort of thing. And will there be any facilities requirements for the security officers? Would they need desk space, office space, that sort of thing? Are there recommendations for a per student when you have a patrol SPO, when you have that kind of person? Is there a recommendation for how many students per? And also, how does that correlate with how many students per counselor, mental health professional, person that could be in the schools to provide assistance on that end?
Erin.
I know I'm over.
You're over time.
I know. I'm sorry. I had this all, and it's all jumbled now. And as you can tell, I have a dry mouth because I don't like speaking. Just one more thing I would say is that it's a nice thing to say when there's a danger. The thing we need is a gun around, and that's cognitive dissonance. That's actually, it's proven many times over that you're much more likely to have the gun that you bring into your own home for self-protection use against yourself. I don't know that it's the exact same situation in the school environment, but that is like the thought process, and I understand that. And I agree that we're far away and that the police are not readily available. I just would like to hear from everyone on the Board of Commitment because it was silence with the exception of one board member. No questions. Not even 5 people? Are they going to each school or
That's because
what?
we've been talking about it in every other.
Understood, but as
Have to be at those
I
meetings.
understand. I hate the meetings, so I don't go to them because I hate them. And I hate speaking at them even more, and everybody hates listening to me all the most. So on that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Erin. Anybody else from this side of the floor?
Can I clarify something that Melanie just said? You said you discussed it at other meetings?
Sure, we've been talking about it for a while.
But in the meetings that...
In our committee meetings.
Okay, the agenda...
Finance committee, facilities
Okay, the
committee.
agendas for just this past 2 weeks, it wasn't on the agenda. Was that discussed?
We didn't have a facilities we didn't talk about it at finance. The RFP's already been out. We talked
Oh,
about it
I
previously.
must have misread the schedule because I thought that...
We talked about it previously. Not big, long, 6-hour discussions, but.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Not actually on this agenda.
School and safety and security services.
Yeah.
That's the
Item
agenda.
2.
You might have picked up the,
They need to pick up the extracurricular.
from the.
All right.
And then
This was
we're
posted so late tonight.
Anybody else?
No, it was not.
Doug Butler, I live in Upper Hanover. I've got to agree with most of the sentiments that have been shared this evening. I think it's borderline crazy to add guns to a volatile situation, to bring a gun in. How many lockdowns have we had or holds? How many times have the police come and visited our schools because of things that happened internal during the day? And you're gonna bring a gun into that situation. Arrogant high school kids who don't understand what life is about, and they're gonna fool around in the hallways, they're gonna fool around near this guard, they're gonna annoy the guard, just like bus drivers get annoyed and lose their cool with kids. and there's gonna be a gun there. Does it end up in a student's hand? Does it end up, do one of these holes that happen turn into the guard losing his gun? And just like the gentleman in the back here said, who are we getting in here? We constantly are doing, generating reports to figure out that our subs are underpaid compared to other districts. We had to fight for how long to get crossing guards hired because the district didn't want to pay for it, Pennsburg didn't want to pay for it, so we were without a crossing guard for how long? And we have the superintendent out in the street on Montgomery Avenue directing traffic.
And we thank him for it, too.
Yeah, it's fantastic, but that's because we're not hiring other people to do those jobs. So we're gonna find money for 5 armed
It's not for
guards.
lack of trying, let's go there.
Trying what? To hire
To
people?
hire them, yeah, yeah.
How are we gonna find qualified guards then? Are we gonna
The
pay
RFP is all
$13 an
about.
hour?
That's what the
And-
RFP is all about.
That's my concern, that we're gonna get somebody in these schools with a gun, pay them minimum wage or slightly above, and have 40 hours of training, maybe 20 hours of training, and have a gun in the school. It just, I think we're much better off with many of the changes that have already occurred. Secured vestibules, additional secured doors at the back of the schools, with keypads or scan cards that, every time a teacher or anybody leaves the building, the door is locked behind them. And when we lock those doors, to have a gun inside worries me far more than not having a gun inside.
I just want to be clear, like, even police departments are struggling finding personnel. Unfortunate to know that they struggle all the time, like, we'll get 150 applicants, 75 don't show up, and then the 75 that do show up, a large portion will walk off with a physical agility test. And I can tell you, a police officer training is 18 to 22 weeks, 40 hours a week. And even when they're done in training, they're not tossed the keys to a patrol car and say, good luck. There's another 8 to 10 weeks of on-the-job training. What I can tell you about an Act 235 security guard, an 18-year-old can take that class for $350.
I don't think we're talking about that anyway. I mean, that's not.
I mean, we see it-
Can I
you
just
see it all
stop
the
everyone
time
for
where
just a
police
second? Because I
officers-
feel like there's a misconception here. And it might be a perception misconception, if there is such a thing. It's been a long day. I feel like everyone that doesn't quite understand what I believe the intent is. The intent isn't to have 40 soldiers standing at the door, with AK-47s and scaring all the kids. That's not the intention. That's not my intention. I think, let me finish. Just let me
Hold on.
finish. Let me finish, please.
Let Melanie speak. Hold on.
That's not the intention that I envision. The intention that I see, and maybe you. So, the misconception, like I said, I feel like everyone's thinking we're having these giant armed guards and they're going to be patrolling everywhere and shooting at whatever moves in the dark. And I don't really think that. I just want you to keep that in mind, that that's not the perception that I'm seeing. And I don't think it's the perception anyone else is seeing.
Okay.
I don't think that we think there's gonna be a SWAT team in the school every day.
Yeah, that's what I'm
But
hearing.
what we
and I'm
do
like,
worry
that's
about
not
is
the
that
point.
you guys aren't considering the fact that there is now going to be somebody who is armed in there. And you have no idea who they are. Did they wash out of the police academy? They wanted a gun so bad, they joined a security force and they got hired. And now there's some gung-ho guy who wants to use that gun.
Right. Sorry.
Go ahead,
that's-
Doug.
Just as a point of qualification, our intention is not to have these folks be employees. So we issued a request for proposal to security firms to supply these individuals.
That's my concern.
All right,
Yeah, just wait.
Well, let me finish.
One of the prerequisites is that they have to be a PCCD approved or vendor or contractor.
Can you say what the acronym is for? I don't know what PCCD
It's
means.
Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, I
Okay,
believe.
thank you.
So they have a list, that's a state agency.
Okay.
And they have a list of approved vendors or contractors. So we limited our pool to that list. And then within our RFP, the individuals that we would consider have to have a minimum of 2 years as a police officer, active duty military, probation officer, or corrections officer. So that's sort of the minimum
Thank you for clarifying
requirements.
That's what I'm trying to say, is I think your perception, some of the perception is that there's, we're just gonna call Joe Blow security guards and get some ding-dongs in here that, think they're cool carrying a gun. That's not the point. I just wanted to say that. So go ahead, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think there was a gentleman over here had his hand raised before. In back. Go ahead.
Steve Runyon, live in Pittsburgh, and I'm still on the fence. I'm not really sure, but I agree with this gentleman here. Response time is the key. Like we saw in Nashville, that person from the outside shot through the door and came in. Luckily, the police got there quickly. Here, in our little corner, unfortunately, it's the world we live in today. It's the way it is. And if you have somebody there that can confront that person and stop it, you can save the children. You can save the children more. And you can try to do all the training and the psychological and all that all you want. That's great, but that's not going to stop the person that's going to come in and shoot through the window, or it's not going to get the police there any faster to confront this person.
Thank you.
So you were talking about the perception, but I'm a junior at our high school, and the idea of one guard, not 40, with a small handgun is honestly terrifying. And I just would like to know, how do you plan to reassure students that this person is safe? And even if it is just a small weapon or even just a taser, how do you plan to reassure all students, even at young ages, that they're safe when the possibility of introducing this weapon doesn't make them feel safe? And whether it is 40 armed guards or just one person, that can have the same effect. And, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That's part to do that. Thank you.
There's no way to tell if that guy is going through a divorce, if he's going through the worst day of his life and he shows up the next morning and a student pushes his buttons and he's got a gun on him. You're introducing that into the schools. Keith, you mentioned that we don't have, with a lack of a centralized police force, it's hard to have relationships, especially over a district this large. And
that is correct.
3 to 5.
And to answer one of your questions about, we do have memorandums of understanding with the police. If something happens, I will tell you now, police will come. It's a matter of how long it takes them to get there. Unfortunately, this is anecdotal, but this is the state that we live in now. How many companies hire security and put them out in front of their office because they've had issues with people trying to come into the building? A disgruntled employee, irrational spouse, man or woman, could be either. It's happened. I've seen this. It's anecdotal evidence. But I mean, this is the state that we live in. You go to a mall, there are security guards there. Some not as well trained as what we had asked for our RFP. But I mean, every place you go, there is security there in one form or another.
Keith, to that point, early on in the conversation, we did reach out to the state police to talk with them about a partnership and having an SRO similar to what Quakertown has with their officer, and they were not interested. They didn't do that. We had the same conversation with Chief Adam, but he doesn't oversee the school. in terms of that. And, you know,
Right.
his feedback was to move in the direction of having actually our own police versus having the contracted piece where we are now. Get different conversations. But, so we have reached out for those conversations and those relationships. And you
Yes,
mentioned
I
the
know.
MOUs. The MOUs are in place. They're required, but they do. And then Mr. Kenwick does host the, you know, every other 2 months or 3 months, the all hazards meeting for those with the same relationship conversations.
So I think in the interest of time, like 30 seconds for closing remarks. I see people raising their hands or already have spoken, so go real quick. Go ahead, Maggie.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that what I said is not opinion, it's based on research, it's not perception. There is no evidence that I found going in it completely unbiased because I was researching in an unbiased fashion. There is nothing that I found from any industry leaders that supported the idea that SROs, armed, increase safety at schools. Secondly, an armed guard is not going to help you with recess, with concerts, with football games, etc. What might help is when, for instance, a local fire department gave away an AR-15 as a raffle and the school district said nothing. If we have a culture of non-compliance with the gun culture, that's one step. I will send research, whether you read it or not, it's fine. It's not my opinion, it is industry-leading research, and I'll happily send it to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing? As a mother raising 3 black sons, it has been a very tumultuous few years, and the media has been highlighting a lot of people of color being shot by police officers. So that being said, you're going to do what you're going to do, but please provide counselors or just someone to talk to them and reassure them, because I'll tell you right now, my sons are scared of people with guns. And that's all I ask. It's just please think about them and just be there to support them.
God forbid they ring the wrong doorbell.
I just wanted to say real quick, I'm not a person that says guns, you know, solve guns, absolutely not. I'm a mom, my babies are in elementary school, so that's where my views are coming from. I guess I am just so desperate that, to me, I just want someone there to protect my babies. I can totally see where a lot of that research comes from, like the high school level. I didn't even really think of that, to be honest with you, until I heard a lot of what you guys said tonight. That makes a lot of sense. I guess for me, you know, just my babies are in elementary school. For me, I feel like maybe it's a little bit of a different perspective. I just want someone there who can protect them.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
people
Go ahead,
that
Swan.
you'll find that unfortunately it's not a Band-Aid.
Was,
I wish it was.
Sorry,
totally
I missed
wish it was.
previous discussion on the topic, like the last meeting. Was a locked gun option discussed at all, where, for instance, there were a gun or guns like kept in the office in a safe, so that if there was a situation where there was an armed person that came to the school, trained guard would then have access to a gun, but not necessarily be carrying on a regular basis in the school? Is that something that was discussed?
Yeah, I don't, not specifically.
Okay, I could just see where that would take care of some of the issues that people have brought up with, like someone losing their temper and things like that. Not having it immediately accessible, being in a situation where there were certain rules where access was allowed and things like that. It's just a thought.
Thank you. All right, 30 seconds.
Quick question, or quick statement. Obviously, my kids are in high school, but if they were still in elementary school, I would be very concerned that they would take the perspective that we can't go anywhere unless there's an armed guard. Because I only feel safe at school because there's an armed guard. There's not one at the restaurants, there's not one at the grocery store, there's not one in Walmart. I don't think there's anyone in any business in the Upper Perkiomen Valley. I mean, there's probably some, but majority of there's not. So I'd be concerned about the kids feeling I can't go anywhere unless there's an armed guard. It could work either way. They're afraid because there is one or there isn't one.
Thank you. Okay. 30 seconds.
Last comment.
The thing is, all those backgrounds sound great, but it doesn't demonstrate conflict resolution experience. 2 years as a corrections officer in a controlled environment does not say that you can do conflict resolution with teenagers. Those all sound great. A military guy that worked a desk is not the same as a military guy that was doing infantry or special forces that is trained under fire. And I think that's some of the stuff. And as we talk about response times, we live in a community that this is the only time response times are important. Response time should be important every day, you know, and we have municipalities that don't properly fund ambulance services, fire departments, and even can't even get a police department full-time.
Totally agree with you on that one. I know, I live in Upper Hanover, so, you know.
All right, so we'll wrap up the discussion there. Like I predicted, varied opinions, both sides of the coin here. I think from a committee perspective, this is just my opinion. Keith, Melanie, you can chime in either way. But I don't think right now we're ready to make a motion one way or another yet. I think from my perspective, we don't have the proposals back yet. They were due today, but we haven't graded them yet.
Well,
Yeah,
I think there's still a lot we need to go through. I think there's still a lot of messaging that we need to get out there. And a lot of good feedback from tonight that, in my opinion, still needs to be taken in and analyzed and reviewed.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
we'll table the decision.
We purposely put it in the Friday update that this meeting was taking place to have, so I heard someone say that the agenda was posted late. I apologize for that if it was posted late, but trying to put it out there that this is when the conversation is taking place. So it sounds like we're going to bring this conversation back to the May meeting, and we'll debrief on something, maybe JP with you. And
Yeah,
some
May
notes here we can
24th.
debrief. 22nd, I believe. I think 24th is a mistake. It's on there, but
Oh, yeah.
can provide some additional information.
And I guess in the interest of transparency, I would love to see the research that you're basing some of the decision consideration on.
Like I said, that's some of the messaging that we have to discuss and make sure that gets out to the community. That everybody's clear on what the decisions are, and why they're being made. So, thank you, everybody, for your time and your thoughts. Appreciate the conversation. Do we want to finish out the agenda, or do we want to wrap up?
The bell's ringing.
Is it Bradley?
No. Phillies game?
No, they're off. They're off today,
It's on good.
Can you knock him out in like 10 minutes, though?
Yeah, if you want 10 minutes, I can give you 10 minutes.
Let's do 10 minutes. All right, thank you.
Okay. Under old business, everybody's aware that we have the NICTES permit for the middle school new off-site sidewalk project. We have finally submitted our paperwork requesting the termination of that, and the inspection is this Wednesday. Okay. So the staff's been working hard to ensure that everything we believe they're going to be inspecting is in good repair. It's taking place 1:30 Wednesday afternoon. There's 3 members of the Conservation District coming out, and we're hoping all goes well.
Do they give an idea of when they'll say one way or another after they do it?
I don't know. Honestly, I've never been, when he came out, or they came out the first time, they didn't notify us in advance, so there were no school district representatives or Mr. Zika, our civil engineer, he wasn't present. So this time, we made sure that wasn't going to happen. So we're all scheduled to meet with them.
So it is an inspection, it's not an inspection, it's the notice of termination.
It's, right. Yes.
So then they're going to inform us
Right.
whether or not it's terminated or not.
Exactly.
Right. But we don't know what that
asking them-
timeline
right,
is.
We're asking them to terminate the permit, they
Right.
need to inspect in order to make that
Rather than cross your fingers.
That it's quick, and then we pass it.
And this is a sort of predecessor for the softball field drainage project, which is currently out to bid. So, high school track, we had an agenda item for some public comments from the last meeting that we brought forward to this meeting. I just wanted to be true to the process and put it back on the agenda.
Like track access on the summers.
Right, so essentially it was, the request was to open the high school track for 2, maybe 3 hours in the mornings over the summer. You know, from my perspective, it can easily be accomplished. You know, I can certainly have staff open it at a certain time and you know, close it off at a certain time. We don't have any of the equipment that some of these other districts have put in, the turnstiles and the swipe cards and all of those things. You know, we could try it without that equipment.
If we did that, we'd probably need to post more signage, you know.
Yeah, we could, yeah, that's an easy, you know, we could draft something to you know, sort of a rules and regulations type of signage.
Could you hire a student to watch over it?
You know, the one hesitation I have is that, you know, there's no way to prevent use of the turf, right? Because they're basically one venue.
Yeah.
There's not a fence that separates the track from the turf, so.
Have to be part of the signage and just.
Yeah, it would have to, you know, and the use of the turf is not really the issue in itself. It's, you know, sort of inappropriate use of the turf, you know, whether you're wearing the wrong kind of shoes or you're bringing, you accidentally spill your Gatorade, whatever it may be, those things we have to try to prevent to, you know, get as much life out of the turf as possible.
It's expensive. That's a big
Just
ticket.
from a liability standpoint, I mean, you know, the track's open for specific use to walk, jog on the track, period.
No bicycling, no,
Yeah.
those-
But what I'm saying is, we're not granting permission to use the turf.
Right.
This is for the track only, just making that clear.
If you open the track and you're letting people walk, are you going to let moms push baby carriages? Something you're going to have to consider. There's no bicycle riding.
And no,
Sorry.
no Harley, no Harley.
Yeah, no harm.
All right, so maybe come back with some proposed signage or something like that, rules and regulations. Right. If we were to go through with this. Let's start there.
I'm sure I could find some, you know, poll some of my colleagues in some of the other districts to see what they're see, you know, what they may have posted. So I'll take that. New business, and I don't know if we want to, some of these things require the projector. I don't know if we want to go through that.
It's not working, it's broken.
It's broken.
Burned out.
Yeah,
So,
it's on for instance.
right, so the sign at Marlboro, as you come down the hill, as you probably notice, the letters are falling off.
Yes.
So I have samples from Reed Sign to, actually 2 different samples to get that repaired. And I was just going to get the will of the committee to, you know, we like A over B or B over A, so I don't know if you want.
Oh, it really is broken?
No, it's not broken, just turn on.
We can do it quickly. Right?
Yeah.
You want to entertain this, switch this out, ear to it.
Yeah.
Ellen's just trying to expedite.
I know, I wasn't sure for a second there.
While this is coming on, I could do the other item quick. Verizon notified us the other day that they are interested in essentially an easement to run a fiber optic line to Marlboro Elementary.
They giving us free internet?
No, but it's at their cost, including the PA1 calls and, you know, the utility markings, the trenching, the site restoration. Apparently, it's something they're doing in that whole area, and it's, you know, Marlboro's just on their list. So, talking to Mr. Roth, he's generally in favor. Most of, I think the phone lines over there have been switched away from Verizon, but there are still some legacy things there, and it gives us options for.
Is there any commitment to them to going with Verizon?
No,
if we allow
not
them
that
down the line?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I certainly will double check that.
But we'll have the option, if we want to go with them, to change
Yeah,
the line.
at their cost.
Right.
Yes.
A lot.
I don't see an issue with that.
Well, maybe if that's, maybe they're doing high-speed internet, which would help. Actually, it would help anybody working from home or any kids working from home.
Yeah, but if they want to run the line at their cost.
I don't understand.
I don't issue either.
Oh, look at
A little bigger. So existing sign here in green. So they proposed something like, and you know, the colors we could work with. So it's basically that style with freestanding or free-mounted letters or something like that.
No, that's ugly. Sorry, that's ugly, I don't like it.
How do you feel, Bella?
Let me tell you how I really feel.
So I'm assuming this one is basically a mounted piece of
sign on
metal.
That looks like a campaign sign.
Yeah, it does.
You're not wrong.
That's much better.
That is.
So we're thinking something along this lines right here? Yeah, they're.
At least you asked me, for sure.
I'm kind of with you on that one.
So I can work with them and just confirm the type of letters and the color. Do we?
They're going to make the letters larger, just like that.
Yeah, I would ask them to, yes.
Yeah. I think that was really nice.
Stand out.
That was definitely an executive decision. Letters that light up.
Well, there is a sign further down that was repaired, it lights up now.
Yeah.
You know, everything in Marlboro is green.
Yes, it is.
Then you have to run
So I
power
don't
to
know if we want to stay with green or we want to put, blue or what.
How will it look with the light on it? Like,
Right,
it wouldn't
that's-
disappear.
exactly.
You know, on the
Yeah.
angle. That is my concern.
So I can work with them on sort of refining this.
That was great in the sun, but then at night when you're hitting the light.
Come back for the next meeting. The other item real quick is just so if you recall, we have Sovec Roofing working in the district doing a master plan for all of the roofing. They're working school to school, and one of the optional services that we paid for was these drone roof surveys. So they actually have a drone, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen, but it has two different cameras on it, a normal camera and an infrared camera. So essentially what happens is they wait for 3 or 4 days in a row of real quality or heavy sunlight, and then they come out at night, and the theory being that any wet areas of insulation, that water will hold the heat, and the rest of the roof material will cool off, and it'll show as a white spot.
That's really cool.
Essentially. So for example, down here, you see this here, that's a potential issue that, they would investigate to see if that's, some type of water infiltration or just heat from a, rooftop vent or a piece of macadam. As you can see, like this is the macadam at the back of Marlboro. You can see how that holds the heat.
Yep.
So that's showing, boiler stack, things like that. So this is Marlboro's roof. We have one for all of the schools. This one actually is the high school. So there are some areas of concern above the pool. But this is part of the process. This is part of their master planning process. They have a system that all of this will be logged into. They're going to grade all of the roof systems as A through F and essentially give us a master plan of, go after this one first, then this one, then that one, with some budgetary costs. Let's see, this is one of my favorite because it looks like the Starship Enterprise.
Yep.
But that's Hereford, actually in good shape. The 4-5 Center, full transparency, is in need of some work. The area that we're replacing this summer, if I can find that picture, is
It's the one that has the most weight on it.
yeah, it's the one that I thought was.
Unfortunately.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I have them all. There it is, actually. So this is, you can see, this is the area above the admin wing at 4-5. So that's getting replaced this summer. This area back here, as you can see, is the locker room, the boys' locker room and the flight room. That would be my recommendation for the next one to go after.
Looks like.
The roofing consultants made the comment that that's the lowest roof they'd ever seen.
Yikes.
But, and actually even over here, a little bit in the edges of the auxiliary gym, we're investigating that discoloration there as well, so.
Do you know we have the full report from that?
I'm hoping it's in the next few weeks. And the other thing that they're doing in these areas that are suspect, they're taking core samples and, having them analyzed for moisture content and then, patching it back and things like that. So, good group, they're good to work with. So, that's kind of a TBD.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you running through that pretty quick.
Yep.
Covers the agenda. Are there any comments from committee members?
Is this your last facilities meeting? Just checking.
One more.
Just checking.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion
Thanks,
carries.
Mark.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.